I never imagined the day my own brother would stare me in the eyes and call me worthless. All while sitting behind the wheel of the car I had worked 3 jobs to buy him. Sometimes the people we sacrifice the most for are the ones who appreciate it the least, and my brother Trevor was living proof of that painful truth. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up, Trevor and I were always different. While I was the responsible one who saved every penny from my after-school jobs, he was the charming dreamer who could talk his way out of anything. Our parents had passed away when I was 18 and he was 16, leaving me to become his guardian practically overnight. The life insurance money wasn't much, but I made sure every cent went toward keeping a roof over our heads and food on the table. I postponed college, picked up multiple jobs, and did everything I could to make sure Trevor could finish high school without worrying about adult problems. "Melissa, you worry too much," Trevor would say whenever I'd stress about bills. "Things always work out." That carefree attitude used to annoy me, but I admired his optimism in the face of everything we'd lost. I thought his spirit was unbreakable, a quality I desperately wished I possessed during those difficult years, when grief and responsibility threatened to crush me. By the time Trevor graduated high school, I had managed to save enough for him to start community college while working my way up to assistant manager at the retail store that had hired me as a cashier 4 years earlier. I was 22, exhausted, but proud of what we had accomplished together. "We made it," I told him at his graduation, hugging him tightly as he rolled his eyes at my sentimentality. "Mom and Dad would be so proud of you." What I didn't know then was that Trevor had already started hanging out with a new crowd, people with expensive tastes and trust funds, who never had to worry about whether the electricity bill would get paid. He began coming home later and later, sometimes not at all. When I'd ask where he'd been, he'd brush me off with vague answers about networking and making connections. "These people have opportunities, Mel," he'd say. "I can't get anywhere in life if I don't know the right people." I wanted to believe him. I really did. After all, wasn't that what I wanted for him? To have opportunities I never had? To break free from the constant struggle that had defined our lives since our parents died? So I ignored the designer clothes that started appearing in his closet, clothes I knew he couldn't afford on his part-time job salary. I told myself he was just trying to fit in, to belong somewhere after losing so much. The first time Trevor asked to borrow money, it was for textbooks. $300 that I happily transferred to his account, proud that he was taking his education seriously. The second time, it was for a laptop that he said he needed for a special project, $800 that stretched my budget thin for months. The third time, it was to cover rent because his roommate had allegedly bailed, $1,500 that I had been saving toward my own education. Each time, the amount grew larger, and the stories grew more elaborate. Each time, I believed him because I couldn't bear to think the alternative, that my brother, the only family I had left, was taking advantage of my love. The excuses became more frequent: car repairs, medical bills, security deposits. I dipped into my savings, maxed out credit cards, picked up extra shifts, all while Trevor posted pictures on social media, at exclusive clubs, and exotic weekend getaways with his new friends. When I'd confront him, he'd have explanations ready. A friend paid for him. He won the trip in a contest. He was networking for a business opportunity. And somehow, I always ended up feeling like I was the unreasonable one for questioning him. "You just don't understand how things work in the real world," he'd say, making me feel small despite the fact that I had been supporting us both in the real world for years. It wasn't until I got the call from the bank about suspicious activity on my credit card that the full picture came into focus. Trevor had somehow gotten hold of my card information and charged thousands of dollars at high-end stores and restaurants. When confronted, he didn't even try to deny it. "You always have money hidden away somewhere," he said with a shrug. "You'll figure it out. You always do." That night I cried until my eyes burned. The betrayal cut deep. But what hurt more was realizing that while I had been putting Trevor's needs first for years, I had become nothing more than an ATM to him. Still, I couldn't bring myself to kick him out or cut him off completely. He was my brother, my responsibility. So instead, I made him promise to get counseling and find a steady job. He agreed, seeming genuinely remorseful, and for a while, things improved. Trevor found work at a marketing firm through one of his well-connected friends. He started paying me back small amounts, and the extravagant spending seemed to stop. I began to hope that maybe this had been a wake-up call for him, that perhaps we could rebuild our relationship on more equal footing. That's when Trevor started talking about the car. His commute to the new job was difficult by public transportation, he explained. If he had a car, he could work later hours, take on more responsibility, maybe even get promoted. The buses were unreliable, and rideshare services were eating up his paycheck. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I hesitated. After everything that had happened, making such a major purchase for him seemed unwise. But Trevor had been doing better. He'd kept his job for nearly 6 months, longer than any position he'd held before. He'd been making regular payments toward what he owed me, and most importantly, he seemed to be maturing, taking responsibility in ways I'd always hoped he would. "I'll think about it," I told him, which Trevor correctly interpreted as a yes. He knew my weaknesses too well, my inability to deny him anything he really wanted, my desperate hope that each sacrifice would be the one that finally made him appreciate what he had. I spent weeks researching reliable used cars, comparing prices, then calculating what I could afford. I wanted something safe and dependable, but not so nice that it would feed into Trevor's tendency toward materialism. Finally, I found a 5-year-old sedan with reasonable mileage and a clean history report. It wasn't flashy, but it was practical and within my budget, especially after I took on weekend shifts at a local coffee shop to supplement my income. The day I surprised Trevor with the car was one of the happiest I'd seen him since before our parents died. He hugged me tightly, tears in his eyes, promising that this would change everything. I believed him because I wanted to, needed to. I handed him the keys, watching as he circled the vehicle with an expression of wonder, as if he couldn't believe it was really his. "This is incredible, Mel," he said. "I don't know how to thank you." "Just use it well," I replied. "This is an investment in your future." For the first month, Trevor was the model of responsibility. He kept the car immaculately clean, drove me to work when our schedules aligned, and even filled the tank without being asked. I started to feel that maybe, just maybe, my faith in him hadn't been misplaced after all. Then came the parking tickets, first one, then 3 more. Trevor claimed he didn't understand the signs, that the rules were confusing. I paid them because the late fees would only make things worse. Next were the speeding tickets, which he promised to pay himself but somehow never did until I got collection notices. Each time, there was an excuse, each one less convincing than the last. I started noticing scratches and dents appearing on the car, which Trevor dismissed as probably happening in parking lots or blamed on careless drivers. The interior began to accumulate fast food wrappers and empty energy drink cans, despite my gentle reminders about keeping it clean. The new car appreciation had worn off quickly, replaced by the same entitled attitude I had hoped was behind us. 3 months after getting the car, Trevor lost his job. He claimed his boss had unreasonable expectations and played favorites, but through mutual acquaintances, I learned he had been consistently late and had missed several important deadlines. Once again, Trevor was home all day while I worked multiple jobs to keep us afloat. The car that was supposed to help him build a career became his ticket to freedom, disappearing for days at a time while he, quote, networked and explored opportunities. I was at my breaking point, physically exhausted and emotionally drained. Years of putting Trevor first had left me with nothing to show for it, except debt and disappointment. I had given up my own dreams so many times that I barely remembered what they were anymore. The realization that I had enabled his behavior, rather than helped him grow, was a bitter pill to swallow. One evening, after a particularly grueling double shift, I came home to find Trevor getting ready to go out. The car keys dangled from his fingers as he checked his reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting the collar of a shirt I'd never seen before. Likely another purchase I would eventually discover on a credit card statement. "Where are you going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level despite my exhaustion. "Meeting some friends," he replied vaguely, not bothering to look at me. "Don't wait up." Something inside me snapped. All the years of sacrifice, of putting my life on hold, of believing that Trevor just needed a little more time, a little more help, a little more understanding. It all came crashing down in that moment. "You're not taking the car," I said quietly. Trevor turned to me with an expression of disbelief. "Excuse me? You heard me. You're not taking the car. Not tonight, not until we talk about what's happening here." He laughed, a short, dismissive sound that cut through me like a knife. "It's my car, Melissa. You gave it to me, remember?" "I bought it for you to get to work," I countered. "A job you no longer have. A job you lost because you couldn't be bothered to show up on time despite having reliable transportation." Trevor's face darkened. "So what? You're taking it back now? Real generous of you." "I'm not taking it back," I clarified, though the thought had certainly crossed my mind. "I'm asking for some accountability. Some recognition of everything I've done for you. Some sign that you actually care about anyone other than yourself." "Oh, here we go." He rolled his eyes dramatically. "Saint Melissa, the martyr who never lets anyone forget how much she sacrifices." His words stung, but I stood my ground. "That's not fair, and you know it. I've never asked for gratitude, Trevor. All I've ever wanted was for you to stand on your own 2 feet. To be the person I know you can be." "Well, maybe I don't want to be the person you want me to be," he shot back. "Maybe I'm tired of living up to your expectations. Maybe I'm tired of feeling like I owe you something just for being your brother." I took a deep breath, fighting back tears. "You don't owe me for being my brother. You owe me for the thousands of dollars I've given you. For putting my life on hold so you could have opportunities. For buying you a car when I can barely afford my own expenses." Trevor jingled the keys in his hand, a smirk forming on his lips. "Well, too bad. What are you going to do about it? The car's in my name, remember? Because you trusted me so much." The mocking tone made it clear. He saw this as a victory. Another example of how he could manipulate my love for him. I felt something shift inside me, a resolve hardening, where there had once been only hope and forgiveness. "You're right. The car is yours. But everything else? The roof over your head? The food in the refrigerator? The utilities? The insurance? Those are mine. And I'm done providing them for someone who can't even show basic respect." Trevor's smirk faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Whatever. I don't need your charity anyway. I've got friends who actually appreciate me, who don't constantly make me feel like a burden." "Are these the same friends who never seem to help when you really need something?" I asked quietly. "The ones who are happy to party with you but disappear when bills need paying?" Something flashed across his face. Recognition, perhaps, or a moment of clarity, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Instead, anger took its place, and Trevor stepped toward me, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you're so much better than everyone, don't you? Little Miss Perfect who never makes mistakes, who always knows what's best for everyone. Well, guess what? You're pathetic. Spending your whole life taking care of me instead of getting one of your own. That's not noble, Melissa. It's sad." His words hung in the air between us, sharp and venomous. For a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. In all our arguments, Trevor had never gone this far, never been this cruel. I felt the tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. Not this time, not anymore. Before I could respond, Trevor pushed past me toward the door. "I'm taking my car," he said with emphasis on the word "my," as if to twist the knife deeper. "Don't wait up." I watched silently as he walked out, the door slamming behind him with such force that the pictures on the wall rattled. One of them, a photo of Trevor and me at his high school graduation, both of us smiling despite the empty spaces where our parents should have been, fell to the floor, the glass cracking in a spiderweb pattern across our faces. It felt symbolic somehow, a physical representation of what had just happened to our relationship. Alone in the sudden silence, I sank to the floor and finally let the tears come. Years of suppressed grief, frustration, and disappointment poured out of me in heaving sobs that left me gasping for air. I cried for the brother I thought I knew, For the parents we had lost, for the life I had put on hold, and most of all for the future I had imagined where Trevor and I would always have each other's backs. When the tears finally subsided, I felt hollow but somehow lighter, as if crying had cleared space inside me for something new to grow. I picked up the fallen picture frame, carefully removing the broken glass. As I looked at our smiling faces, I realized something important. The person in that photo, the sister who would sacrifice everything for her brother, wasn't serving either of us anymore. She was enabling behaviors that were destroying both our lives. It was time for her to go. I stayed up late that night, not waiting for Trevor as he had assumed, but making plans. I researched apartment listings in my price range, made a detailed budget that for once didn't include supporting my brother, and even looked into evening classes at the local community college. The possibilities that opened up when I considered only my own needs were both terrifying and exhilarating. When Trevor didn't come home that night, I wasn't surprised. He had disappeared for days at a time before, usually crashing on a friend's couch, or, more recently, staying with whatever girl he was seeing that month. I used the time to start packing, sorting through years of accumulated possessions, and deciding what was truly important to keep. By morning, I had filled several donation bags and created a small pile of essentials to take with me. The apartment I had found was a studio, tiny compared to our current place, but it was all mine and within my budget if I kept both jobs. The landlord had agreed to a viewing that afternoon, and if all went well, I could move in by the end of the month. I was just finishing my coffee when I heard the key in the lock. Trevor stumbled in, looking disheveled and exhausted. The smell of alcohol and cigarettes clung to him, and his eyes were bloodshot. He seemed surprised to see me sitting calmly at the kitchen table. "You're still here," he said, the words slightly slurred. "Thought you might have run off to sulk somewhere." "I'm not running anywhere," I replied evenly, "but I am moving out." That got his attention. He blinked at me, confusion replacing the defensive sneer he had walked in with. "What are you talking about?" I gestured to the packed bags by the door. "Exactly what I said. I'm moving out. I found a place I can afford on my own. You can stay here until the lease ends in 2 months, but after that, you're on your own." Trevor laughed, but it sounded forced. "Yeah, right. You always say you're done with me, but you never actually leave." "Not this time," I said, surprised by how calm I felt. "This time is different." Something in my tone must have convinced him because the mocking smile faded from his face. "You can't be serious," he said, a note of panic creeping into his voice. "Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to pay rent?" "That's not my problem anymore," I replied, the words both painful and liberating to say. "You have a car, you have friends, you're smart and capable when you choose to be. You'll figure it out." "I can't believe you're doing this," Trevor said, anger replacing the initial shock. "After everything we've been through, you're just walking away? What kind of sister does that?" "The kind who's finally realized that helping doesn't always mean giving. Sometimes it means stepping back and letting someone face the consequences of their own choices." Trevor's face flushed with anger. "So, that's it? You're abandoning me just like that?" "I'm not abandoning you, Trevor. I'm refusing to abandon myself anymore." I stood up, gathering my purse and keys. "I have an appointment to see an apartment. We can talk more when I get back, if you want to." As I moved toward the door, Trevor blocked my path. "You're making a huge mistake," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You need me just as much as I need you. Who else do you have?" "No one. You've spent so long taking care of me that you don't even have friends of your own." His words hit a nerve, but I didn't let it show. "Maybe that's true," I acknowledged. "But it's never too late to change that. It's never too late to start building the life you want." "And what about family?" he demanded. "Doesn't that mean anything to you anymore?" "Family means everything to me," I said softly. "That's why I can't keep doing this. We're destroying each other, Trevor. Can't you see that? This isn't healthy for either of us." For a moment, I thought I saw a flash of understanding in his eyes. A glimpse of the brother I remembered. But it was quickly replaced by the hardened mask he had been wearing more and more often lately. "Fine," he spat. "Leave, see if I care. But don't come crawling back when you realize how lonely life is without me." He stepped aside, and I walked past him, my heart breaking even as I knew I was making the right decision. At the door, I turned back. I love you, Trevor. I always will. When you're ready to have a real relationship, one based on mutual respect and care, I'll be here. But I won't be your bank anymore, and I won't be your excuse. The apartment viewing went well. The place was small but clean, with good natural light and a location close enough to both my jobs that I could walk and save on transportation costs. The landlord, an older woman named Gloria, seemed to take a liking to me, and by the end of the tour I had signed a lease starting the following week. As I walked back to what would soon no longer be my home, I felt a mix of emotions: fear about starting over on my own, sadness about the state of my relationship with Trevor, but also a growing sense of excitement about the possibilities ahead. For the first time in years, I was making a decision based solely on what was best for me, and it felt both selfish and necessary. When I returned, the apartment was empty. Trevor had taken off again, probably to lick his wounds and rally support from friends who would tell him what he wanted to hear: that I was the villain in this story, that he was the victim of my unreasonable expectations. Part of me was relieved to avoid another confrontation, but another part wished we could have talked more, maybe even found some understanding. I spent the next few days packing and preparing for the move, while also maintaining my work schedule. Trevor came and went, mostly avoiding me, and when we did cross paths, the atmosphere was tense and uncomfortable. He made no further attempts to change my mind, which I took as a sign that on some level, he knew this separation was inevitable. The day before my move, I came home from work to find Trevor sitting in the living room, the car keys in his hand and a strange expression on his face. He looked up when I entered but didn't speak right away. "Hey?" I said cautiously, unsure of his mood. "Hey," he replied, his voice subdued. "So tomorrow's the big day, huh?" I nodded, setting down my bags. "Yeah, I'll be out of your hair by noon." He turned the keys over in his hand, staring at them as if they held some answer he was seeking. "I've been thinking," he said finally, "about what you said, about consequences and choices and all that." I sat down across from him, giving him my full attention. This was the most he had said to me in days, and there was something different about his demeanor, a thoughtfulness that had been missing for too long. "I'm not saying you're right about everything," he continued, still not meeting my eyes. "But maybe you're not entirely wrong either." It wasn't exactly an apology or an admission, but from Trevor, it was significant. I waited, giving him space to continue. "I went to see Dad's old friend yesterday," he said, surprising me. "Mr. Reynolds. Remember him?" I nodded. Mr. Reynolds had been our father's best friend and had tried to stay in our lives after the funeral, offering help that Trevor had always rejected. He said he might have a job for me. In his warehouse. It's not glamorous or anything, but it's steady work. Trevor finally looked up at me. I told him I'd take it. "That's great," I said carefully, not wanting to say the wrong thing and break this fragile moment. "When do you start?" "Monday," he replied. "It's across town, though. The bus route would take like 2 hours each way." He hesitated, then held out the car keys to me. "I think this should go back to its rightful owner." I stared at the keys, not reaching for them. "Trevor, the car is in your name. It's yours." He shook his head. "You bought it. You paid for it. He swallowed hard. "I was awful to you about it. About everything, really." I was speechless. This was the closest Trevor had come to acknowledging his behavior in years. "I can't take the car," I said finally. "You need it for your new job. That's why I bought it in the first place, to help you build a life." "Then consider it a loan," he suggested, "until I can buy my own. I'll pay for the insurance and gas and maintenance. For real this time, not just promises." I hesitated, torn between wanting to believe in this change and fearing another disappointment. "Why now?" I asked. "What's different this time?" Trevor was quiet for a long moment. "When you said you were leaving, I didn't believe you at first. You've threatened it before, but you always stayed. This time, though, I could tell you meant it. And it scared me, not just because I'd be on my own, but because I realized I might actually lose you. Not as a safety net or whatever, but as my sister. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of our father that it made my heart ache. I went out driving last night, just thinking. Ended up at that lookout point where Mom and Dad used to take us to watch the sunset. And I just sat there in the car you worked 3 jobs to buy me, and I felt like the biggest jerk in the world. He looked up at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. You've given up so much for me, Mel. Everything, really. And all I've done is take, and then blame you when it wasn't enough. I don't want to be that person anymore. I felt my own eyes filling with tears. This was the brother I remembered, the one I had always believed was still in there somewhere beneath the entitlement and anger. I don't expect you to believe me, he continued when I didn't respond. I wouldn't, if I were you. I've made promises before and broken all of them. But I'm going to prove it this time. Not with words, but with actions. I want to believe you, I said honestly. But you're right. It's hard after everything that's happened. I know, he nodded. That's why I'm not asking you to stay. I think you're right about needing space. About building your own life. You deserve that more than anyone I know. He stood up, placing the keys on the coffee table between us. The car is yours to do with what you want. Sell it, keep it, whatever. I'm going to save up and get my own eventually, but for now, I'll figure out the bus schedule or get a bike or something. As he turned to leave the room, I called after him. Trevor? He paused, looking back at me. Thank you, I said simply. A small, sad smile crossed his face. Don't thank me yet. Wait until I've actually done something worth thanking. The next day, I moved into my new apartment. Trevor helped, carrying boxes and furniture without complaint. We didn't talk much, both of us cautious in this new, fragile dynamic we were building. When everything was unloaded, he lingered in the doorway, looking uncertain. It's a nice place, he said, glancing around the small studio. It suits you. Thanks, I replied. It's a start. An awkward silence fell between us, years of hurt and mistrust, creating a barrier that wouldn't be easily dismantled. Well, he said finally, I guess I should go, let you get settled in. I nodded, but as he turned to leave, I found myself saying, wait. He looked back, questioning. I picked up the car keys from where I had placed them on the kitchen counter. Take these, I said, holding them out to him. You need the car more than I do right now. My work is walking distance, and you have that new job to get to. He shook his head. I can't. Not after everything. Consider it a loan. I echoed his words from the day before. On one condition. What's that? He asked. We have dinner once a week, just to check in. To stay in each other's lives, but in a healthier way. A genuine smile spread across his face, the kind I hadn't seen in too long. Deal, he said, carefully taking the keys. But I'm paying for dinner. Every time. I laughed. We'll see about that. As I watched him leave, I felt a cautious hope blooming inside me. I didn't know if this change in Trevor would last, if we could rebuild what had been broken between us. But for the first time in years, it felt like we were both moving in the right direction. Not just for each other, but for ourselves. The first few weeks of our new arrangement felt strange, but oddly refreshing. I threw myself into setting up my apartment, making it truly mine in a way no space had ever been before. I painted the walls a soft sage green that reminded me of hiking trips our family had taken when I was young. I found a secondhand bookshelf at a local thrift store and filled it with books I'd always wanted to read but never had time for. Each night I would come home from work, make myself a simple dinner, and sit by the window with a book, savoring the quiet and the freedom to just be. True to his word, Trevor showed up every Thursday evening to take me to dinner. Our first meeting was awkward, filled with careful small talk and long pauses. We stuck to safe topics: my apartment decorating, the weather, a new movie release, avoiding the deeper issues that still lingered between us. But by the third week, something had shifted. Maybe it was the physical distance that allowed us to see each other more clearly, or perhaps it was simply time healing old wounds, but conversation began to flow more naturally. So how's the job going? I asked as we sat at a small Italian restaurant of his choosing. I noticed he'd picked a modestly priced place, not the trendy spots he used to frequent with his old friends. "It's actually good," he replied, surprising me with his enthusiasm. "Mr. Reynolds has me managing inventory now. Says I have a knack for organization, which is pretty ironic considering my bedroom growing up." I laughed, remembering the perpetual disaster zone that had been his personal space. Who would have thought? "Definitely not me," he admitted with a grin, "but I kind of love it. There's something satisfying about knowing exactly where everything is, making sure nothing gets lost in the shuffle." As he talked about his work, I noticed subtle changes in him. The way he sat straighter, how his eyes lit up when describing a system he'd implemented that had improved efficiency. This was a Trevor I hadn't seen in years, engaged and proud of something he had accomplished through his own efforts. "What about you?" he asked after a while. "How's the new place really working out?" I told him about my evening reading ritual, about the community garden I'd joined down the street, about the cooking class I'd signed up for that started next month. "It's strange," I confessed. "I spent so long defining myself by my responsibility to you that I'm not sure who I am without it. But I'm enjoying figuring it out." Trevor's expression grew serious. "I never wanted to be a burden, Mel. I didn't know how not to be, I guess. We both did the best we could after Mom and Dad died," I said softly. "Neither of us knew what we were doing." He nodded, absently tracing patterns on the tablecloth with his finger. "I've been thinking a lot about that time, about how quickly everything changed. One day we were a normal family, and the next it was just us against the world. I think part of me never really accepted it, you know? Like if I just pretended hard enough that everything was fine, then it would be." "I get that," I said, realizing for the first time that while I had processed our parents' death through action, taking care of Trevor, managing finances, keeping our lives together, he had never really been given the space to grieve. He had been 16, suddenly orphaned, and then immediately placed under the care of his barely adult sister, who was fighting to keep them both afloat. "I think I resented you sometimes," he admitted, not meeting my eyes. "Not because of anything you did wrong, but because you seemed so together. Like losing them didn't break you the way it broke me." "Oh, it broke me," I assured him, my voice catching. "I just didn't have the luxury of showing it. Someone had to pay the bills." Trevor reached across the table and took my hand, a gesture so unexpected that I almost pulled away in surprise. "I'm sorry I didn't see what it was costing you," he said simply, "and I'm sorry I made it harder." In that moment, something that had been tightly wound inside me for years began to unravel. Not completely. There was too much history for that, but enough that I could breathe a little easier. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, squeezing his hand before letting go. "It means a lot." After dinner, as we walked to the car, my car that he was still borrowing, Trevor cleared his throat nervously. "So, I have something to show you. If you're up for it?" Curious, I agreed, and we drove across town to a small apartment complex I didn't recognize. Trevor parked and led me up to a second-floor unit, unlocking the door with obvious pride. "Welcome to my new place," he announced as he flipped on the lights. "Just signed the lease yesterday." I looked around in amazement. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, but clean and surprisingly organized. A far cry from the chaos that had always surrounded Trevor. "This is amazing," I said sincerely. "How did you manage this so quickly?" He shrugged, but I could tell he was pleased by my reaction. "Been saving every penny from the warehouse job. Mr. Reynolds gave me a raise last week, said I was picking things up faster than he expected. The security deposit wiped out most of my savings, but it's worth it to have my own space." I wandered around, noting the carefully made bed, the small desk with a laptop, not the latest model I noticed, and a refrigerator with actual groceries inside. On the wall was a framed photo of our family. The four of us at the beach the summer before our parents died, all sunburned and smiling. "It's not much," Trevor said, suddenly sounding unsure. "Not compared to your place." "It's perfect," I assured him. "I'm really proud of you, Trev." His face lit up at the praise, and I realized how rarely I had expressed pride in him over the years. There had been so much disappointment and frustration that I had forgotten to acknowledge the good moments, the small victories. "There's something else," he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket and handing it to me. Inside was a check. Not for a large amount, but enough to be significant on a warehouse worker's salary. "First installment," he explained. "I figured out how much I owe you, roughly. It's going to take a while to pay it all back, but I'm committed to doing it." I stared at the check, emotion welling up inside me. It wasn't about the money. It had never really been about the money. It was about the recognition, the acknowledgement of everything that had passed between us. "You don't have to do this," I said. "Yes, I do," he replied firmly. "Not just for you, but for me. I need to make this right, Mel. I need to be someone I can respect when I look in the mirror." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. In the months that followed, both Trevor and I continued to grow and change. I enrolled in evening classes at the community college, pursuing the education I had postponed for so long. At first, it was terrifying, being surrounded by students mostly younger than me, trying to balance coursework with 2 jobs. But there was an exhilaration in the challenge, in filling my mind with new ideas and possibilities. Trevor stuck with his warehouse job, impressing Mr. Reynolds enough to be promoted to assistant manager after just 6 months. He continued to make regular payments toward what he called his, quote, sister debt, despite my insistence that it wasn't necessary. He had also started seeing a therapist, something he'd resisted for years. "It helps," he told me during one of our weekly dinners. Talking about Mom and Dad, about everything that happened after. I didn't realize how much anger I was carrying around. "I'm glad," I said, meaning it. The changes in Trevor were remarkable, not just in his increased responsibility and reliability, but in his demeanor. The defensive edge that had characterized him for so long was gradually softening, replaced by a quieter confidence. Our dinners had become the highlight of my week, a chance to reconnect and rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. We still had disagreements. We were still Trevor and Melissa after all, but they no longer carried the weight of years of resentment and unmet expectations. One evening, about 8 months after I had moved out, Trevor arrived at my apartment looking particularly nervous. He paced around my small living space, picking things up and putting them down, clearly building up to something. "What's going on?" I finally asked. "You're making me dizzy with all that pacing." He took a deep breath and sat down across from me. "I got an offer," he said. "A job offer. A real one, with benefits and everything." "That's fantastic," I exclaimed. "From where?" "A logistics company that works with the warehouse. They've been impressed with some of the systems I implemented and want me to join their team as a junior operations manager." He couldn't contain his smile. "The pay is almost double what I'm making now, and there's room for advancement." I jumped up to hug him, genuinely thrilled by his news. "Trevor, that's amazing. You deserve this." He hugged me back tightly. "There's a catch, though," he said as he pulled away. "The job is in Portland." My excitement dimmed slightly. Portland was a 5-hour drive away. Not impossibly far, but not close enough for weekly dinners either. "Oh," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "Well, that's still great news." Trevor watched my face carefully. "I haven't accepted yet," he said. "I wanted to talk to you first." "Why?" I asked, genuinely confused. "This is your decision, your career." "Because you're my family," he said simply. "The only real family I have left. And after everything we've been through, I don't want to make a major life decision without considering how it affects you." I was touched by his consideration but also concerned. The old dynamic, where Trevor's choices were limited by my needs and expectations, was not something I wanted to recreate, even in this more positive context. "I appreciate that," I said carefully, "but I don't want you to pass up an opportunity like this because of me. We've both worked too hard to get where we are." "I know," he nodded. And I'm not saying I won't take it, just that. I wanted to make sure we'd be okay, that this wouldn't undo everything we've rebuilt. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Of course it won't, I assured him, though part of me worried about the same thing. Our new relationship was still relatively fragile, built on weekly contact and careful attention. Would it survive the distance? Besides, he added with a small smile, I figured you might want your car back permanently. I laughed, the tension breaking. Is that what this is really about? Finding a graceful way to return my car? He joined in my laughter. You caught me. 8 months of personal growth was all an elaborate scheme to avoid car payments. We spent the rest of the evening discussing logistics. When he would move, how often we could visit each other, what this meant for our weekly dinner tradition. By the time he left, the initial shock had worn off, replaced by a mixture of sadness at the impending separation and pride in how far he had come. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. Trevor gave notice at the warehouse, found an apartment in Portland with the help of his new employer, and began packing his meager belongings. I helped when I could, between classes and work, still adjusting to the idea of him being so far away. The night before he was scheduled to leave, Trevor insisted on taking me to an upscale restaurant, far nicer than our usual spots. When I protested about the expense, he waved me off. This is a special occasion, he insisted. Besides, I can afford it now. There was pride in his voice, not the false bravado of before, but the genuine satisfaction of someone who had earned what they had. Over dinner, we reminisced about childhood memories, laughing at stories we had nearly forgotten. It felt like closing a chapter, acknowledging the past before turning to the future. I have something for you, Trevor said as dessert arrived. He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny car that made me laugh out loud when I saw it. I saw it and couldn't resist, he explained, grinning. A reminder of where we've been. It's perfect, I said, immediately putting it on. I love it. There's something else, he added, suddenly serious. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out an envelope. This is the title to the car, signed over to you. And this, he placed another envelope beside it, is the last payment. I'm officially debt-free, at least financially. I stared at the envelopes, emotion catching in my throat. Trevor, you didn't have to do this now. You need to save for your move, for getting established in Portland. He shook his head firmly. This was more important. I needed you to know that I meant everything I said, that this wasn't just another empty promise. You gave me so much, Mel. This doesn't even begin to repay it, but it's a start. I reached across the table and took his hand. Thank you, I said simply, knowing he would understand everything I wasn't saying. The morning of his departure came too quickly. I stood in the parking lot of his now empty apartment, watching as he loaded the last few boxes into his car. A used compact he had purchased with his savings, practical and reliable, much like the one I had bought him. That's everything, he said, closing the trunk. We stood facing each other, both reluctant to say goodbye. Call me when you get there, I instructed, and drive carefully. If you get tired, pull over. Don't try to do it all in one stretch. He smiled at my familiar big sister concern. Yes, ma'am, he teased. Any other instructions? Just one, I said, suddenly serious. Be happy, Trevor, you've earned it. His smile faded, replaced by an expression of deep affection. You too, Mel. Promise me you'll focus on your own happiness now, not just everyone else's. I promise, I said, and meant it. We hugged tightly, both of us fighting tears. As we pulled apart, Trevor said, This isn't goodbye, you know, it's just... See you later. Portland isn't that far. I know, I nodded. And there's always video calls. Every Thursday, he confirmed. It's a date. I watched as he got into his car, waving as he pulled away. There was an ache in my chest, but it was different from the pain I had carried for so long. Not the sharp sting of betrayal or disappointment, but the bittersweet pang of seeing someone you love move forward on their own path. Back in my apartment, I felt the emptiness acutely. For so many years, my life had revolved around Trevor, his needs, his problems, his crises. Now, for perhaps the first time ever, I was truly on my own, responsible only for myself and my own happiness. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. I looked around my small but cozy space, at the books I was finally finding time to read, at the class schedule pinned to my refrigerator, at the photos of Trevor and me. Not just the old ones from childhood, but new ones from our weekly dinners, both of us smiling, genuine smiles. We had come so far from that terrible night when he had called me worthless while sitting in the car I had bought him. The memory still stung, but it no longer defined our relationship. We had both grown, both changed, both learned to see each other as we truly were, flawed, human, but worthy of love and respect. As promised, Trevor called that evening to let me know he had arrived safely. We talked for nearly an hour, him describing his new apartment and the surrounding neighborhood, me filling him in on a paper I was writing for my psychology class. "I'm proud of you, Mel," he said before we hung up. "I don't think I've said that enough." "I'm proud of you too," I replied, meaning it more than I ever had before. After the call ended, I sat by my window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. There was a lightness in my heart that had been absent for too long, a sense of possibility, of future, of hope. The bracelet Trevor had given me caught the fading light, the tiny car charm glinting. I touched it gently, thinking about how far we had come and how far we still had to go. The road ahead wasn't clear, it never is, but for the first time in years, I felt ready for the journey, whatever it might bring. Sometimes the hardest lessons come from those closest to us. Sometimes the deepest wounds are inflicted by the people we love most. But sometimes, if we're brave enough to set boundaries, to demand respect, to believe in the possibility of change, sometimes the broken places can heal stronger than before. As darkness fell outside my window, I made a silent promise to myself. To nurture this newfound freedom, to pursue my own dreams, with the same dedication I had once given to caring for Trevor, to build a life that was truly mine. And I made another promise, too, to never forget the lessons of the past year, to remember that true love doesn't diminish us but helps us grow, that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is step back and let someone find their own way. The car that had once been a symbol of my enabling and Trevor's entitlement had become something else entirely, a reminder that even the most painful situations can transform into opportunities for growth if we're willing to do the hard work of change. I smiled as I turned away from the window, feeling more at peace than I had in years. The future was unwritten, full of potential and promise, and for the first time I was excited to see what it would hold. Not just for Trevor, but for me. 1 year after Trevor moved to Portland, I found myself driving along the Pacific Coast Highway, the windows down and music playing softly on the radio. The ocean stretched endlessly to my left, waves crashing against rugged cliffs in a timeless rhythm that made my own problems seem small in comparison. I was taking a week off from work and school, my first real vacation in years, to visit Trevor in his new life. The past year had been transformative for both of us. True to his word, Trevor had thrived in his new position, quickly becoming an essential part of his company's operations team. Our weekly video calls had become a cherished ritual, a time to share our triumphs and challenges, to seek advice, or simply to laugh together about the absurdities of life. For my part, I had finally found my own path. After 2 semesters at community college, I had discovered a passion for psychology, particularly focused on family systems and resilience in the face of trauma. My professors encouraged me to apply to 4-year colleges, seeing potential I had never recognized in myself. To my astonishment, I had been accepted to the State University with a partial scholarship, an opportunity that would have seemed impossible just 2 years earlier. As I rounded a curve in the highway, the GPS announced that I was just 30 minutes from Trevor's apartment. Excitement bubbled up inside me. Despite our regular calls, it had been 6 months since I'd seen my brother in person, when he'd come home for the holidays. I was eager to see his face, to hug him, to witness firsthand the life he had built. When I finally pulled up to his address, I was surprised. The apartment complex was nicer than I had expected, modern and well-maintained, with landscaped grounds and a small pond complete with ducks waddling along the shore. It was a far cry from the basic, utilitarian places we had both lived in before. Before I could even get out of my car, Trevor was bounding down the steps toward me, a huge smile lighting up his face. He looked good, healthy, and rested in a way I couldn't remember seeing him before. His hair was shorter, his clothes simple but nice, and there was an ease to his movements that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Mel!" he called, pulling me into a bear hug as soon as I stepped out of the car. "You made it!" "Of course I did," I laughed, hugging him back just as fiercely. "I said I would, didn't I?" "Yeah, but seeing you here, in Portland, at my place, it makes it real somehow." He grabbed my bag from the back seat before I could protest. "Come on, let me show you around." Trevor's apartment was a revelation, clean and organized, with actual furniture that matched and plants that weren't dying. Art hung on the walls, not expensive pieces, but thoughtfully chosen and nicely framed. Books lined a small bookshelf, many on business and logistics, but also fiction and biographies. "This is amazing, Trev," I said, genuinely impressed. "You've really made a home here." He ducked his head, pleased, but a little embarrassed by my praise. "It's coming along. Still a work in progress." "Aren't we all?" I replied with a smile. After I'd freshened up from the drive, Trevor insisted on taking me to his favorite local coffee shop. As we walked the few blocks from his apartment, he pointed out landmarks and shared little stories about his neighborhood, the bakery that made the best sourdough bread, the bookstore where he'd found a signed first edition of our father's favorite author, the park where he sometimes ran on weekends. "You seem to really love it here," I observed as we settled at a small table with our drinks. "I do," he admitted. "It's the first place that's felt like mine, you know. Not somewhere I ended up by default, or because someone else wanted me there, but a place I chose for myself." I understood exactly what he meant. My own apartment, modest as it was, had become a sanctuary of sorts, a space where I could pursue my own interests, make my own choices, be fully myself, without apology or explanation. "So," Trevor said, leaning forward with interest, "tell me about the university. When do you start?" "August," I replied, still slightly disbelieving. "I gave notice at both jobs last week. It feels surreal, like I'm finally doing what I was meant to do all along." "You are," he said with conviction. "You're going to be an amazing psychologist, Mel. You've always been the one people turn to when they need help making sense of things." I felt my cheeks warm at his praise. "We'll see. It's a long road ahead, undergrad and then grad school if I want to practice. I'll be in my 30s by the time I'm done." "So what?" he challenged. "You'll be in your 30s anyway. Might as well be doing something you love." His simple logic made me laugh. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a pretty good teacher," he replied, raising his coffee cup in a small toast to me. The rest of the day passed in a pleasant blur of sightseeing and catching up. Trevor showed me his favorite spots in the city, from the famous Powell's Books to a hidden garden tucked between office buildings. We ate dinner at a small Thai restaurant where the staff greeted him by name, suggesting he was a regular. It wasn't until we were back at his apartment, relaxing with a glass of wine, that our conversation turned to deeper waters. "Do you ever think about that night?" Quote. Trevor asked suddenly, his voice quiet. "When I said those things to you about the car?" I looked up, surprised by the abrupt change in topic. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Less often now than before." He nodded, staring into his wine glass. "I think about it a lot. About how close I came to losing you completely. About how different things would be if you hadn't been strong enough to walk away." "It wasn't just strength," I said carefully. "It was desperation, too. I didn't know what else to do." "You did the right thing," he said firmly. "Even though it hurt like hell at the time, it was exactly what I needed. What we both needed." I smiled softly, remembering the pain and uncertainty of that period. I wasn't sure. For a long time, I wondered if I had made a mistake, if I had abandoned you when you needed me most. You didn't abandon me, Trevor insisted. You saved me from myself. And more importantly, you saved yourself. He hesitated, then added, I've been seeing someone you know. A therapist, I mean. For about 8 months now. You never mentioned that in our calls, I said, surprised but pleased. I wanted to make sure it was something I would stick with before I told you, he explained. But it's been really good, actually. Helps me understand why I acted the way I did for so long. The anger, the entitlement, the pushing away the people who actually cared about me. And why was that? I asked, gently, genuinely curious. Trevor took a deep breath. Fear, mostly. After Mom and Dad died, I was terrified all the time. Afraid of more loss, afraid of not being enough, afraid of the responsibility. But instead of facing it, I ran from it. I made you carry everything, so I wouldn't have to feel that fear. His insight took my breath away. In all our conversations over the past year, we had never delved this deep into the psychological underpinnings of our dysfunctional dynamic. I was afraid too, I admitted. Afraid of failing you, of not being able to keep us together, of letting Mom and Dad down. I thought if I just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, I could fix everything. We were just kids, Trevor said softly, trying to make sense of something that made no sense. We were. I agreed, feeling a wave of compassion for our younger selves. 2 frightened children desperately trying to navigate an adult world neither of us was prepared for. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, each lost in our own thoughts. Then Trevor smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. Enough heavy stuff for one night. I want to show you something tomorrow that I think you'll really love. The next morning, Trevor was uncharacteristically secretive about our plans. It's a surprise, was all he would say as he ushered me into his car, a newer model than the one he'd had when he left, I noticed. We drove for about an hour, leaving the city behind for winding country roads that cut through verdant farmland and patches of forest. Finally, Trevor turned onto a gravel drive that led to a charming farmhouse surrounded by gardens and fruit trees. What is this place? I asked as we parked. A retreat center, he explained, run by a nonprofit that offers healing programs for people who've experienced loss. They do amazing work with grieving families, especially kids who've lost parents. As we walked toward the main building, a woman emerged to greet us. Trevor, she called warmly. Right on time. And this must be Melissa. Linda, this is my sister, Trevor confirmed. Mel, this is Linda Carter, the director here. She's been kind enough to give us a tour today. Linda, a warm woman in her 50s, with laugh lines around her eyes, shook my hand enthusiastically. Your brother talks about you constantly. I feel like I already know you. For the next 2 hours, Linda showed us around the property, explaining their programs and philosophy. The center offered everything from weekend workshops to week-long retreats, all designed to help people process grief in healthy ways. They had therapy animals, art studios, hiking trails, and quiet spaces for reflection. Professional counselors led group sessions, but there was also plenty of time built in for rest and personal healing. We especially focus on siblings, Linda explained as we walked through a sunlit room filled with art supplies. They're often the forgotten grievers, expected to be strong or overlooked in the chaos that follows a major loss. I felt a lump forming in my throat as I looked at the children's artwork displayed on the walls, drawings and paintings that expressed loss, love, anger, and hope in the unfiltered way that only children can. It's beautiful, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The work you do here. Linda smiled kindly. Trevor thought you'd appreciate it. In fact, he's been quite involved with us for the past few months. I turned to my brother in surprise. You have? He nodded, suddenly looking shy. I volunteer on weekends sometimes, mostly helping maintain the grounds, but occasionally I sit in on the young adult groups, share my story, listen to theirs. I was speechless. The Trevor I had known for so many years, self-centered, focused only on immediate gratification, would never have given his time to such a cause. This was yet another sign of how profoundly he had changed. "That's not all," Linda added, exchanging a glance with Trevor. "Should we show her?" Trevor nodded, and Linda led us to a newly constructed building at the edge of the property. Inside was a library, not large, but thoughtfully designed with comfortable seating areas, large windows that let in natural light, and shelves filled with books on grief, healing, personal growth, and resilience. "Welcome to the James and Sarah Martin Memorial Library," Linda announced, gesturing to a small plaque by the entrance that bore our parents' names. Tears sprang to my eyes as I read the plaque, then looked questioningly at Trevor. "I've been saving," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "From every paycheck. It's not much compared to what you did for me all those years, but I wanted to do something that would honor Mom and Dad, and you. Your strength. Your sacrifices." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I was overwhelmed, tears flowing freely now. "Trevor, I don't even have words." Linda tactfully excused herself, leaving us alone in the quiet library. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked when I could speak again. "I wanted it to be a surprise," he said. "And honestly, I wasn't sure I could pull it off. It took longer to save than I expected, even with the company matching some of my contributions." I walked around the room, taking in the carefully chosen books, the comfortable chairs, the peaceful atmosphere. It was exactly the kind of place our mother, an avid reader, would have loved. "Kids and teens come here when they need a break from group activities," Trevor explained. "Or when they just want a quiet place to read or think." Linda says sometimes it's easier to find healing words in a book than to say them out loud. I turned to face my brother, seeing him with new eyes. The transformation I had witnessed over the past year went far beyond the external changes. The job, the apartment, the responsible handling of money. Those were important, but this depth of empathy, this desire to turn his own pain into something that could help others, this was the true measure of his growth. "I am so proud of you," I said, the words inadequate to express the fullness of my heart. Trevor's eyes shone with tears of his own. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Mel. Not just the money or the car or all that practical stuff, though God knows I took advantage of that for too long. But the belief that I could be better, that I was worth something, even when I was at my worst." "You were always worth something," I said fiercely. "Always, even when you couldn't see it yourself." He nodded, accepting my words in a way the old Trevor never could have. "I know that now, and I want other kids to know it too. Kids who've lost their parents, who are feeling lost and scared like we were." We spent the rest of the afternoon at the retreat center, meeting some of the staff and volunteers, sitting in on a gardening activity with a group of children who were spending the weekend there. I watched Trevor interact with them. Gentle, patient, somehow knowing exactly when to talk and when to just listen. It was a side of him I had never seen before, and it filled me with a quiet joy that was almost painful in its intensity. On the drive back to his apartment, we were both quiet, processing the emotions of the day. Finally, Trevor broke the silence. "There's something else I've been meaning to talk to you about," he said, glancing over at me briefly before returning his eyes to the road. "What's that?" I asked. "I got another job offer, a promotion actually. The company wants to expand their operations to the East Coast, and they've asked me to help set up the new location." I felt a flutter of anxiety. "That's on the other side of the country." "It is," he acknowledged, and my first instinct was to turn it down. "To stay here, close enough to visit you regularly, to keep volunteering at the center." "But?" I prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice. But then I realized I was falling back into old patterns, making decisions based on fear instead of growth. He took a deep breath. "I think I'm going to take it, Mel. It's an amazing opportunity career-wise, and I think I need to prove to myself that I can build a life completely on my own, without a safety net." I was quiet for a moment, wrestling with mixed emotions. Part of me wanted to protest. To ask him to stay where I could keep an eye on him, where our carefully rebuilt relationship wouldn't be strained by even greater distance. But the wiser part of me recognized that this was exactly what healthy growth looked like. Each of us pursuing our own paths, supporting each other without becoming entangled or dependent. "I think you should take it," I said finally. "It sounds perfect for you." The relief on his face told me he had been worried about my reaction. "Yeah? You really think so?" "I do," I assured him. "You've proven you can handle it. And it's not like we won't stay in touch." "Weekly video calls are non-negotiable," he said firmly. "And holidays. We'll figure it out." "We will," I agreed. "We're pretty good at that now." That night, after Trevor had gone to bed, I sat on the balcony of his apartment, looking out at the lights of Portland spread below. I thought about the journey we had both taken since that awful night when Trevor had called me worthless while sitting in the car I had bought him. If someone had told me then that 2 years later we would be here, me heading to university to pursue my dreams, Trevor thriving in a career and giving back to others who had experienced similar trauma, I wouldn't have believed it possible. The chasm between us had seemed too wide, the damage too severe. Yet here we were, both healing, both growing, both finding our own ways to honor our parents' memory and create lives that would make them proud. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks and difficult conversations, old habits that died hard, and new boundaries that had to be continuously reinforced. But the work had been worth it. More than worth it. I thought about the tiny car charm on the bracelet Trevor had given me, which I still wore every day. What had once been a symbol of pain and resentment had transformed into something else entirely, a reminder that sometimes the most valuable journeys are the ones that begin in our darkest moments. The next morning, as we sipped coffee and planned our day, Trevor suddenly asked, "Do you ever regret it? Taking care of me all those years? Putting your life on hold?" I considered the question carefully. "I regret some of how it played out," I said honestly. "I regret enabling behaviors that weren't healthy for either of us. I regret not setting boundaries sooner." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "But regret taking care of you? No, never. You're my brother, we're family. What I regret is that it took me so long to realize that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them fall, to let them face the consequences of their actions." Trevor nodded thoughtfully. I needed to fall, to hit bottom, to realize what I was losing. "We both needed to learn that lesson," I said. "Me, perhaps more than you. I had to learn that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself, that you can support someone without carrying them." "Well, for what it's worth," Trevor said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I'm grateful for all of it, the good and the bad. It brought us here. And here is pretty damn good." I squeezed his hand back, feeling a profound sense of peace. Yes, it is. The rest of my visit passed in a blur of hikes in the Columbia River Gorge, explorations of Portland's famous food scene, and quiet evenings of conversation that ranged from the mundane to the philosophical. By the time I packed my car to head home, I felt both refreshed and contemplative, carrying with me new memories and deeper insights. As Trevor helped me load the last of my bags, he pulled me into a fierce hug. "Drive safe," he said. "Call me when you get home." "I will," I promised, hugging him back just as tightly. "And Mel?" he added as I got into the car. "Thank you for everything. For not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to." I smiled through the tears that threatened. That's what family does, the real kind anyway. They hold on to the love, even when it's hard. As I drove away, watching Trevor wave in my rearview mirror until he disappeared from sight, I felt a profound sense of closure. Not the kind that comes from doors slamming shut, but the kind that comes from healing old wounds so completely that they no longer define you. The road ahead of me stretched long and open, much like my future. University classes would start in a few months. Trevor would move to the East Coast around the same time. We would both be embarking on new chapters, separated by thousands of miles yet connected by something stronger than distance could ever break. I thought about the lost, frightened children we had been when our parents died, and the wounded, dysfunctional adults we had nearly become. And then I thought about who we were now, still imperfect, still learning, but growing toward the light instead of retreating into darkness. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with painful words spoken in moments of anger. Sometimes we have to reach our breaking point before we can start to rebuild. And sometimes, the things that threaten to destroy us, like my brother calling me worthless while sitting in the car I bought him, become the catalysts for the most profound transformations. As I merged onto the highway, heading home to prepare for my own new beginning, I felt a lightness in my heart that had once seemed impossible. The past would always be part of us, but it no longer had the power to determine our future. That belonged to us alone. Two siblings who had weathered the worst of storms and emerged stronger, wiser, and more deeply connected than ever before. The road unfurled before me like a promise, and I drove toward it with an open heart, grateful for the journey. Every painful, beautiful, transformative step of it. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.